to be like therapy is for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think if they find that when they are alone, they're not out, they're not in public, they're at home, it's just them and themselves in the mirror, and they look at themselves and they don't like what they see, they don't like how they feel, they don't want to be alone with their thoughts because they feel the phoniness of everything that's going around them. They realize, okay, yeah, this is all for the gram, this is all for social media, and I know that's not real because I just posted a picture and then I went home and I'm sad and I'm all alone. I think that that's a key indicator is what you feel when you're by yourself. Do you truly feel happy? Do you feel fulfilled? Or are you waiting for the next big thing to happen so that you can post it online? Like when there's no cameras, when there's no glitz, no glams, what is it that you feel? What is it that you see? Do you truly love yourself?
Welcome back to the Empowered Woman, Badass, and Unfiltered podcast. Your host, Olivia, here, and we are talking about a super important topic. If you're a person of color, an Indigenous person, or a Black person, and you have stigma, or you are interested in going to therapy, you might need some help, but you just like aren't really sure about getting that help. This podcast, this one is made for you. This is for you in mind. Now, if you're listening to this and you are not one of those people that I mentioned, but you have friends that are those people that are mentioned, send this to them. We're coming up on a time where there's a lot, it's a compound effect of a lot of things going on in our world, in our economy. And there are resources out there for us. And we don't have to live with all the stresses, the burdens, everything in life. And that is exactly why I have Sandtrice Russell here. She's a licensed professional counselor, mental health advocate, and podcast host. So definitely check her links below. I've got her link tree and her website. Definitely check out her podcast listed in her link tree. Thank you so much for joining me today.
You're absolutely welcome. Thank you so much for having me. It's definitely a pleasure to speak with you again and really be able to dig into some of these topics that we're going to be covering. Thank you so much.
Of course, of course. So let's get into the meat of this. What are some of the biggest reasons that Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color really need to go to therapy?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest issue is because we have so much unresolved trauma. And when I say trauma, everybody knows about trauma in regards to, soldiers coming back from wars. It relates to post-traumatic stress disorder and things like that. But a lot of us don't focus in on those complex issues that we experience within the African American community, going back, to just our history of being enslaved and going through the civil rights movement and all of those different things that we've gone through as a people that have still not really been fully dealt with. And that thing, our trauma is carried in our DNA. There are a lot of studies out there that show that we pass things genetically to our new generations of individuals. And so there's so much stuff that we just don't talk about as it relates to those things, like poverty, being raised in situations where maybe you're around gun violence or you're losing people to that. If you're being raised in households where you are experiencing abuse emotionally because your parents didn't learn how to be able to be effective communicators and really teach you how to move forward. So there's just so many things that we are taught to not talk about and not deal with. Childhood sexual abuse that happens where we have individuals in our families that we protect instead of us really getting help for the individual that's doing the abusing. We blame the victims. And so there's just so many things that we don't talk about and that we don't address within the African American community, and we're taught to just deal with it. Don't talk about it. Don't go to school and tell people. Don't go and talk about those things. Just hold them in and keep them to yourselves. And so with that's one of the biggest key things that I've seen when working with African American clients is that they've been told it's not for us. We don't do it. We don't need to do it because we can just take it to Jesus or go to church and pray about it. And so I think that those are a lot of the key issues that I'm seeing that Black people are facing as it relates to trauma and just the stigma around mental health.
Absolutely. I mean, you talked about a few things that I want to jump on. Complex issues. Not just, from the slavery standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
but from the standpoint of the generational wealth gap. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
That's a complex issue where it's and the gentrification of many
Right.
communities. So, you've had family that's owned land and it's been
Mm.
taken sold for cheaper, and then now it looks like some beautiful location. And I think a lot of learning, like what Black people specifically have been taught, spending habits,
Mm.
that contributes to poverty. I saw this thing because I'm super like entrepreneurial and I'm all into this stuff, right? And I
Gotcha.
saw this post and it was like, um the hood isn't poor. If the hood was poor, Chinese and Arab people would not be buying and operating businesses there. We just have poor spending habits.
We do.
And I mean, like there's that I think I'm one of those people. I'm very big on personal accountability, really big on looking and seeing what it is and understanding, all right, I have to deal with this, because if I don't deal with this, it's going to continue to perpetuate. And that's why, the term generational curse term like goes a long way.
Mm.
And I mean, I don't necessarily think that it's as spiritual as you say. I think it's just habits that have been
Mm.
passed down over and over again until somebody chooses to change them. Habits like coping with your stress with drugs and alcohol. Those are
Right.
very common things, not just in the Black community, but since we're talking about, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, those are ways that people do handle their traumas.
Right.
It's really through substances, and not only,
Mm.
but it's those multiple. There's so many different types of addictions, but the substances and gambling. I work in a casino. Like I work
Mm.
in a fine dining restaurant inside a casino. I've never gambled in my life, but I can tell you, I see so much of
Facts.
those habits. And I'm not just saying Black people like this. No, a lot of people, it's that mentality and I think when it comes to money mindset, like this is something that I had to dive into. Sometimes people don't even feel worthy of having. They can get,
Mm.
but they don't feel
Right.
worthy of keeping. So building up the self-worth is something that is tied to trauma as well, because if you don't feel worthy in your own household because you've been abused mentally, physically, sexually, then you will never, not never, unless you choose to do the work,
Yeah.
then
And
it's
that's key.
very unlikely
Right.
that you're going to change that self value that you have. And when you change your self value, you change who you are as an individual, and you start to heal that trauma. I've said over and over again that I believe that what Black people need the most is healing.
Yeah. And a lot of that healing comes through the therapeutic process. It does
Mm-hmm.
come through coping and learning that you have a problem. And that's what I see so much with so many of my clients, is not recognizing that things like depression, things like anxiety are things that are common everyday issues, but they're things that show up and they are a symptom of what we're experiencing from our unresolved traumas as it relates to those things like poverty, which you spoke about, those things like addiction, which we use to self-medicate versus dealing with healing. And you can't heal what you don't expose. You can't heal what you don't deal with. You have to really be able to tap in and acknowledge that there is a problem and that we need to be able to do something differently. And that's what the therapeutic process is all about. Recognizing, one, what is the problem? What's happening? What's going on? Two, am I doing anything to make that problem better? And if I'm not, then that means that it's time for me to do something different and work on my own healing. And that healing can look a lot of different ways, but it must start with first being able to recognize this is a problem. I don't need to hide this. I don't need to drink to deal with that. I need to talk about it. I need to unpack it. And then I need to start making some different choices in terms of how I choose to show up in my life. And the self-love piece is really, really important, because we are sometimes taught as a people, and a lot of it was indoctrinated in us, that we are less than, we're seen than less than by a lot of different cultures. It's not just a white or black thing, it's a bigger thing of how we are seen. And like you said, within our communities, we have people coming here to take our dollars, and we're seen as that. But the problem is, a lot of times, that there's that internalized racism that we deal with, of that self-hate and that lack of self-love that we have, because we start to believe what people say about us. We start to believe the narrative and we forget who we are. And that therapeutic process can be a part of rediscovering who you are, how rich your ancestry is, and how you can begin to overcome that and define your own narrative as it relates to beginning your story in the way that feels the best and most authentic for yourself.
How does somebody, like, if they're in an environment that everybody goes out to drink and
Mhm.
smoke, and they all want to buy the newest clothes, all the new things, you know what I'm saying? And so that's
Mhm.
when they'll spend the checks on, and they like to post online
Yeah.
of all the glamorous things that they've got going on. How do they realize if they're, in a situation that really they really need some therapy, but they are also in a world that shelter like hides all of that? Because I there is a specific demographic of people that I've started to view with just
Mhm.
watching and being online and being in person. I'd be in person, all right? Like,
Okay.
I see this in real life. Um, are like, they'll go out to eat, for instance, since I work at a
Mhm.
fine dining restaurant, they'll go out to eat, take a bunch of pictures, not even really be on their phones the whole entire time, not even really enjoying the people that they're with. It's a toxic
Okay.
environment. As soon as somebody leaves the table, they're talking about the people that are with them. So you're in this toxic friendship environment. You know what I'm saying? So you're used to these kind of toxic traits, and you're used to people being like this. You're used to the drama. You're used to all that other stuff.
Mm.
So you don't have the community that's already welcoming to talk about your issues, right? Somebody that's in a community that does not have the right to speak about it, how do they be like, you know what, I really need to go talk to a therapist? What is something that would really help that person be like, I can, this is for me?
To be like therapy is for them.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think if they find that when they are alone, they're not out, they're not in public, they're at home, it's just them and themselves in the mirror, and they look at themselves and they don't like what they see, they don't like how they feel, they don't want to be alone with their thoughts because they feel the phoniness of everything that's going around them. They realize, okay, yeah, this is all for the gram, this is all for social media, and I know that's not real because I just posted a picture and then I went home and I'm sad and I'm all alone. I think that that's a key indicator, is what you feel when you're by yourself. Do you truly feel happy? Do you feel fulfilled? Or are you waiting for the next big thing to happen so that you can post it online? Like when there's no cameras, when there's no glitz, no glams, what is it that you feel? What is it that you see? Do you truly love yourself when it comes to those moments of their lives? And if you're finding that those things are lacking and you're looking for other people for validation, that's when you
Mhm.
know that there is a void within you. That's when you know it's time for you to seek some help outside of that particular social circle, because those are the moments when people are most likely to fall into a depression and really really question themselves and whether or not they even still want to be here.
Mhm.
So I think it's about what happens when it's just you by yourself. Those are the key indicators there.
You answered that question so well. You got what I was trying to say. I love it. I was like, oh my God, this is like, I'm saying all these words. I'm like, I hope my point conveys, but that, oh my goodness. Yes. When you're all alone, that's really when it hits.
Yeah.
A lot of people can't sit by themselves.
Mm-mm.
And it took me, it took me a long time to get like that, to be like happy by myself. It took me like just my own personal like journey. I noticed, I was out at a bar. I stopped drinking in October of last year.
Okay.
And I went to a bar with my little brother. I was like almost 2 months pregnant at this time. Or I was a month and a half pregnant at this time. I just found out I was pregnant at this time. And
Mhm.
I go out with him, and I didn't tell him, I waited, but I was just out there with partying with my little brother, because I've never gotten to do that, because we live in different states. So we're just out and about, and all these people are drinking, and I'm like, I'm so past this level of life. I'm like not even doing that. But I saw really beautiful women out. I mean, just so beautiful. And it used to be, for me, it used to always be like the light skinned girls with the pretty hair that I always felt intimidated by or triggered by. And even some of like the very dark skinned women with just gorgeous, gorgeous, perfect skin. Oh my, very intimidated by. I didn't feel that. I looked at this girl, I was like, oh my goodness, she's so beautiful. And I did not feel less than. I did not. And that was a key for me, of how much growth I had had throughout the years, because younger Olivia would have been like, oh my God, I'm not that pretty. I don't look like, I would have started comparing and all this other stuff. And I used to be super shallow. I'm saying all of this to say, it wasn't until I started to be comfortable with who I am and accepting who I am, and sitting in the darkness, sitting in looking in the dirty mirror, looking at the things that I didn't like about myself, looking at the things I wanted to change, that I could start to appreciate others for their beauty and leave it at just that, and not take away from myself, not tear down myself, truly love myself. And I just I want to put the cherry on top. That was a good one. That was a good answer. So there's a lot of stigma in the community when it comes to going to therapy.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest stigmas around it that you've heard, because you work in this industry?
Gotcha. I think the biggest stigma is just the idea that you're acknowledging that there's something wrong that God can't fix, or that the people in your life can't fix. I think that that's the biggest thing, because if you admit, that, oh, I have a problem with anxiety, or I have a problem with depression, then for some people, the biggest issue around that is oh, I'm taking away the ability of God to heal me in those situations. But we have to do work when it comes to that. It's not just, oh, you fix it. You have to do something in order to change that. And another stigma is just, the idea of, oh, well, only crazy people go to therapists. Well, no, I think we all have a certain level of dysfunction in our lives that could create situational anxiety, situational depression. And so a lot of it revolves around religion for some people of color. A lot of it also revolves around, okay, well, what are other people going to think about me? Are they going to label me as crazy? And also, it means that I'm admitting that I'm not perfect. I'm admitting that this facade that I put out to the world, that it's not real and it's not true. And so I think it's that idea of that I don't want to admit that there's something in me that needs to change or needs to be fixed. And therapy isn't about fixing something. It's about learning to move through the challenges that come into your life. It's about developing healthy coping skills and being able to truly learn to respond to things differently, and not just doing what you've always been taught, because we all have things that have been passed down generationally to us. That doesn't mean that it's the best way for us to build healthy relationships or to be able to truly build happiness in our lives. And so I think confronting those stigmas and facing them head on and still making a choice is what a lot of people have to end up doing. And I think that that's usually the breaking point that people get to before they come to therapy. They realize, you know what I'm doing isn't working. Let me try something different.
Okay. There's a lot that I want to add to this.
Okay.
Just because, yeah, I definitely see those as true issues, and thank you for sharing that. Because I want to go through with you and kind of debunk some of these stigmas that people have, so they can actually start to get the help that they really need,
Gotcha.
because that's so important. um Acknowledging that something is wrong.
Mm.
When you get sick, I and you get a cold, right?
Yeah.
You take medicine, don't you?
do. I mean, I don't know about everybody else,
Like
but
you might do some herbs, you might like do, something to like, it might be some home remedies or whatever.
right.
If you into like that type of stuff, you might not go the true medicine route, but you do something to
Mhm.
help your body recover. Um, mental health is just like that.
Exactly.
You just can't see it. And it was a click for me when my husband said it, because uh we talk about mental health a lot. And
Mm.
he's like, mental health is just like physical health. You just can't see it. Like you get sick sometimes.
Right.
You need help sometimes, like you still gotta take your medicine. And for all my religious people, I hear you. I hear you, like, let God, won't he do it? Yes, he will. But faith without
Yes.
works is dead. Faith without works is dead. You cannot sit here and be like, oh Lord, do this for me, but then continue to perpetuate the same actions. Continue not to take the help that he's giving you. Like, there are resources out here, which we're going to get
Hmm.
into, but
Yes.
I wanted to go ahead and put that in there because that's the scripture. He says it, and he don't say
Yeah.
not to get help. All right.
Right.
He put people in this world. Everybody has specific talents and gifts. And if you don't use those talents and gifts as assets, then you're disservicing God.
Mm.
So are you really so religious? Like, are
Mm.
you really? All right. Only crazy people go to therapy. This kind of goes back to the whole, like, I'm actually going a different route.
Mm.
That's just like saying people don't need coaches, but all of the high level people in this world have had a coach. We're talking about Michael Jordan had coaches.
Mm.
Um, we have a lot of different females out there that are very successful, not in the sports realm, but they had mentors and coaches.
Yeah.
Um, so it's something that is needed, and that's a different route for it. But just like you need training wheels when you're riding a bike in the beginning.
True.
And sometimes in life, there's things that you go through because we all go through things we ain't never been through before.
Those are facts. Those are straight
You know what I'm
facts.
saying? And
Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
there's people with a tool that can help you with your toolbox, that and help you with your coping skills,
Mm.
that are going to be more positive and more, and allow you to have a better, more joyous life. We're not saying go to therapy so you can just attack all this stuff and just be miserable. No, we're talking about healing. And this is
Exactly.
to heal. Like, you got to look at the end game. I think a lot of people look so much at the short term issue when it
Mm.
comes to therapy. I think that's why a lot of these stigmas are, okay, what are people going to think about me?
Mm.
Don't ever let somebody else's opinion stop you from your growth.
Right. That part.
Like, I'm not here for it. Like, that excuse, and it's a real stigma. It's a real thing. It's not for me. Oh, you know what? I thought that only white people's dogs had had got nervous, or not nervous, anxiety. I thought only white people's dogs had anxiety. And then I
Mm.
get Stella. And I'm like, no, this is a real thing. Like,
It is,
dogs, it
unfortunately.
don't
It
matter.
is.
It don't matter. And I'm anybody that's white that's listening to this, please know that I'm far from racist or anything like
Mm.
that. But I really, me thinking, I'm like, that's not, there's certain things that you just think are like certain people's problems.
Exactly. But it's
That
not.
ain't, no,
Yeah.
just that is, so just because you haven't seen other people in your community do it or anybody else doesn't mean it's not for you. If it's something you need, let's go back to what you said. If you are, when you are alone,
Mm.
and you don't feel okay, you don't like the person that you see in the mirror, you can't, you know, you feel so disturbed while you're by yourself,
Mm.
it's for you. It's for you. All right.
Yes.
So let's talk about some different resources.
Okay. Well, there are a lot of resources out there. One of them that I definitely recommend is findblacktherapist.com. There's also therapy for Black girls. That's also a directory that's out there for African American females or BIPOC females who are looking for therapists. Um, And there's also Open Path Collective, which is also a resource where you can go to that particular website and look for any type of therapist that you're looking for and just put in your zip code, and it offers therapy at a discounted rate, because that's another big issue within some of our African American communities around finances and not being able to afford therapy. So there are some affordable solutions out there. I also recommend taking a trip to Psychology Today to look at different profiles, and they do also have it broken down if you're looking specifically for a therapist of color, or if you also, want to look at with the other therapists. I do think that sometimes for our people, it is important to have someone that can understand some of those unique issues, but there are lots of therapists out there that can help you. The African American therapists actually only make up 4.4% of all therapists nationwide. And so there is, there may be the need for you to look outside of just your community, but if you are able to connect with someone and that's what you feel like you need, I do recommend looking on Psychology Today to just find someone that you feel would be a good match for you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. So lastly, I want to talk a little bit about your podcast.
Okay.
Share where people can hear more of you and more of what you have to offer.
All right. So I do host a podcast called Self-Aware and FW. It is a podcast that focuses on taboo topics in mental health, and you can listen to it wherever you stream your podcast. We're on Apple Music, Amazon, Spotify, Google playlist. We're on any platform that you want to listen to your podcast. So you guys can always check that information out. And you can also follow anything that I do on Instagram at TreatyLPC.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for giving me all these tips. Thank you for revving me up. These things always, I get all so excited. I be feeling like these give me life, So I greatly appreciate you, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else you do in your space.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
Of course.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Empowered Woman, Badass and Unfiltered podcast. If you found any value in this, please consider sharing and subscribing. Now go out and be a badass.